Hello everyone, my name is Javiera and I'm going to be teaching you academic writing. What we're going to talk about today is the rules of academic writing and how to make sure that you answer your essay questions and you're able to construct knowledge and understand the text through following certain guidelines to make sure that you can write properly. When we talk about academic writing, we talk about the way that academics or scholars communicate the findings of the research. And it's set up in a way that it defines the intellectual boundaries of each discipline. Writing for physics is not the same as writing in the humanities, but there are certain rules that applies for every single discipline. The characteristics of academic writing include a very formal tone, the use of the third person rather than a first person perspective. Even when you're discussing your own ideas, you try to refer to your text and to your research rather than to your own thinking. And you need to focus on answering the research problem or the research question using precise word choices and underlying or defining the text in a very specific manner. There are certain rules that apply for every aspect of academic writing, and it's the way that you present the ideas, where you introduce your ideas, how you define or explain your methodology, how you discuss your findings, how you contrast and compare the literature, but mostly how you cite and refer to someone else's work. Because if you don't do that, if you just copy and paste someone else's words, you are committing plagiarism. Plagiarism is basically that you're using someone else's work without acknowledgement. You can use my work, you can use your teacher's work, you can use literature, but you need to acknowledge, you need to attribute the authorship of that text. When you just copy and paste without citing or without acknowledging, you're pretending that these words are yours when they're not. If you use someone's ideas, words, phrases, without documenting them as a citation or without referencing them, you will then be guilty of plagiarism. And plagiarism have big penalties because it's basically academic misconduct. So what are the strategies to avoid plagiarism? When you have to put your research into writing, you need to conduct the prior research, when means go and look into the literature, conduct interviews, find your data, locate the resources. You need to have a package of information before you start writing. To make sure that you have the correct information for answering your research paper, or to write your thesis, or to answer your essay question, you need to make sure that you can read through every part of the paper. An abstract is not enough information, for example. You might find just an abstract. You say, okay, this abstract is interesting, but an abstract does not provide you with the core information of a paper. So you need to be able to read through, assess the validity of the paper, and evaluate your sources. We need to make sure that the papers that you're using are valid for your research. You might find that the paper is interesting and is well written, but it might not provide you with the information you need. So you need to make sure that following the structure of the papers, following the structures of the chapters of the books you read, they answer your questions. And this is something that we're going to learn to do when you first arrive here. But also, you need to highlight the information that you plan to use for your sources. So from your sources, you need to make sure that you know which parts of a paper you're going to use, which part of a chapter. So once you have located your information, you need to plan how to use your sources, because you need to have them very well documented, as you will need to cite them and refer to them when you're doing research. When you have to put your research into writing, you need to find, you will find out there are 3 ways of referencing information into your papers. One is quoting, the second one is paraphrasing, and the third one is summarizing. When you correctly employ these three types of reference systems, you will avoid plagiarism, okay? Also, if you have written something before and you want to use it again, but you don't quote or paraphrase or summarize yourself and then acknowledge yourself as the author, you will be committing self-plagiarism. And this is as bad as plagiarism. So, how are we going to incorporate research or sources into the text? We need to make sure that we have the structure, we have the literature, we have the data, we have the information that we need to use for our essays and research papers, and we need to make sure that we're going to include them in a very organized way. So, quoting means, okay, when we talk about quoting, means exactly repeating what someone else has said. In the case of Atzberger, what I'm doing with this author is just opening with his surname. Okay, et al. Means he wrote this with more people. The year when he wrote this, quotes the exact verbatim quote, and the pages where I took it. This reference, so this author, will go straight into my reference list or my bibliography. But what I'm saying is I'm not interpreting, I'm not summarizing, I agree with what the authors have said in here. Therefore, I'm going to use the entire quote, but I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that this quote is not mine. When you paraphrase, maybe you want to change or re-explain the way in which an author has said something to make it more clear to your readers. Maybe the author that you're reading is far too complicated. You can understand it, but you are not sure if your reader will be able to understand. So you simplified the sentence. So if we go back, the way that Atzberger explains science and technology here is quite complicated. Here, I've simplified his text to make it easier for other people to read it. But again, I'm quoting him as where I took the sentence from and which page this information can be, in which page this information can be located. But if you can see on the two previous examples, there is page 137. Here is a summary of what Atzberger et al. Wrote in over 10 pages. So when we talk about, when we need to summarize what the authors have said in a very long piece of research, we can summarize. But we need to make sure that we just summarize their ideas. This is slightly more complicated than quoting or paraphrasing, because you need to summarize someone else's words without putting your opinions or giving your insights. You just need to respect what the author has said before. So, a bit of exercise in here. How we punctuate the quotations. This is a style called APA, so it's the American Psychology Association, which is quite not the most simple, but the most effective for me. All the academics might ask you to use all the reference systems. They don't change so much. This is a good way to exemplify how reference work, but changes like with Harvard or MLA. So we'll talk about it when you come here. When you want to talk about or you want to refer to a quote, you might like to, for example, agree. So you agree what Reinfeldt says. Okay? So according to Reinfeldt, head of the observational astronomy team at NBU. So who's this Reinfeldt? I'm just saying who's this person. It's not just a random author because I'm talking about science in here. Okay? He says a specific sentence, or I can just set Reinfield of NBU if I use the NBU. I'll explain what NBU means before in my text. I can just use like the acronym. I'm just citing him again, but it's his words. These are his words, not mine. So I cannot interpret what he means. I might assume that the glories of the universe are not readily apparent to the naked eye. I must say, like, okay, humans cannot see this, but this is not what he said. I just want to say exactly what he said without any interpretation. You need to make sure that you put in brackets the year of in which Reinfield have said whatever he has said. Maybe you want to, well, you might need to put the page in some cases. In this case, we're just talking about the punctuation. If you find that any letters might change the sentence but fit in your grammar, you just need to put it into brackets. Sometimes you will find quotes inside. You might find that an author is being quoted in someone else's work, and you might like to quote that. So if you find that a specific author has been quoted by someone else, but you want to use this quote, you need to quote twice. You need to quote the author that you're referring to, but also where he's been quoted. It's not that you have read Edison's book in this case. You read Prosper's book that mentioned Edison. Therefore, you need to say that Edison in 2000 said X, Y, and Z, but it was quoted in Prosper. And both of these works need to go straight into your bibliography. Paraphrasing. This is more complicated than quoting, just because you need to understand what the author means. You need to make sure that you fully understand. If you are not clear or you don't understand 100% what the author means, quote, if you feel that you can explain what the author has said in your own words, and you're going to take the risk of paraphrasing, do it. But you need to make sure that you simplify and clarify as you paraphrase. If you have a quote that you want to paraphrase, which is already complicated to read, but you want to make it even more complicated, you are not doing a good work. Paraphrase is just to clarify and simplify concepts. It's not to make them even more complex. So you need to retain the exact meaning of the original. You do not interpret the meaning. You do not give your personal opinion. You need to keep the same length. You're not over-explaining, so don't try to write over what the author has said. You need to keep the ideas of the tone, the message. And you do not use the same word as phrases. So if you right-click over your computer and try to find synonyms just to pretend that you're paraphrased, but you're just changing the meaning of the word or just using synonyms, is not paraphrasing, okay? Because sometimes the synonyms might not be adequate if you're writing in a language that is not your native language, because you might not be able to assess if they mean something similar but not exactly the same. So if you want to maintain your own writing and agree, for example, and disagree with what the author said, but restate someone else's ideas and belief, you need to provide an in-text citation, okay? And you have to put the original aside. So you need to make sure that you keep the idea. So you're looking at both. So you're looking at the original citation, original quote, and then you can start writing word by word and explaining what you really want to say. If it doesn't look good, revert and just use quotes. If you put it in your own words and you maintain the idea as original and you don't over-explain or under-explain, you will rewrite the information, but remember, you need to refer to the author. So Some examples. The original quote is teenagers are hurt by raising the minimum wage in 2 ways. But paraphrase, and this is made by right-clicking, finding synonyms on a computer. Teens are wounded, but hurt and wounded are not the same word. By increasing the minimum salary in 2 fashions, that really does not make sense. And actually, any academic will be able to spot that sentence as like, oh, this is but paraphrasing. Why doesn't it work? Because only few words were changed. The original sentence structure is still visible, but the synonyms and the words used are not really well chosen. A correct paraphrase will be like, for 2 reasons, so explaining the 2 ways that are at the end of the original, increasing the minimum wage negatively affects workers, so who's affecting it, from the age of 16 to 19. So that means sort of young adults, between teenagers and young adults. So this is the correct way of paraphrasing, but just right-clicking using synonyms, actually pretty bad and pretty poor academic practice. Again, we have the original on the top and the paraphrase at the end. Read it through. I'll give you like a couple of seconds, and then we will see if it's good or bad. So the original says, the word on Wall Street is that the housing market is getting so weak, it will crimp consumer spending, which until now has helped to keep the economy afloat. The paraphrase used in this below is like, the concern on Wall Street is that the housing market is getting so pathetic that it will reduce the consumer spending, which up to now have kept the economy from failing. I want you to think for 2 seconds if this is good or bad paraphrasing. It's actually the correct paraphrasing, because economists are concerned that consumer spending is now keeping the national economy alive, so be affected by the troubles in the housing market. This is the correct way of paraphrase an idea. You see? This is quite poor, just changing few words. And it is much better. I'm going to move now to summarizing. Summarizing, I'm telling you, is slightly harder because you need to summarize larger pieces of text into very concise and narrow paragraph. So, doing summaries is a really good academic exercise for you to understand what other people want to say, okay? But it does not require to critique or to respond to the ideas in a text. So if you're going to summarize, and it's something that we're going to practice quite a lot in here, your ideas are not welcome. Unfortunately, this is part of the rules of academic writing. When you're summarizing, you're not responding, you're not critiquing, you're not pushing your ideas into the text. That's going to happen when you have to argue your ideas or when you have to write the discussion or the conclusions. But while you're writing literature review, for example, you need to keep your ideas on a little box aside, because you might use them later. But when you're summarizing, quoting, or paraphrasing, your ideas stay away of what you're saying or of what you're writing. So it is important to remember that a summary is not an outline or a synopsis. It's of the points of the author. So it's not that you do some bullet points and then you just put them into text. A summary is a distillation of the ideas or the argument of the text. Maybe you have an entire chapter, but you cannot quote and paraphrase an entire chapter. You might like to say that you read 5 chapters in I don't know, human development, and what you summarize out of these 4 chapters are specific ideas that might use it to construct your own argument. So you summarize someone else's idea, you get an opinion, but you keep that opinion on a little box aside, and then you, when you have to write a discussion, you put your ideas into place after you have used the summary to distill the ideas. So it's basically a reconstruction of the major points of development of a text, an idea, and it's followed with certain points or relevant information that help you to elaborate the construction of the summary. Again, it's just a condensed version of a set of ideas, retains the original writer's tone, concepts, idea, and point of view. Yeah? And a good summary should be comprehensive, concise, coherent, and independent from text, so, but should follow the structure. So if you want to summarize a chapter, you don't start with the end of the chapter at the top of your summary and use the first part of your chapter at the end of the summary, because that might confuse the reader. So keep the structure quite similar. So if someone wants to read the full chapter later, might be able to follow from your summary what the author is saying. So you will guide the reader later on. Read the chapter, read it carefully, pay attention to the keywords. Use your dictionaries to look for the words that you don't know. Remember that academic writing tends to use very, very complicated words, and there are certain people that really love to use Latin. So sometimes even though they write in English, they love to use Latin. So you might like to use certain online tools to translate from Latin to English or to your native languages to understand what they really mean. I'm one of the people to blame to use Latin every now and again, but I love it. But you need to make sure that you keep the ideas in order and you include essential information, but omit, for example, the details. In 2017, in a very, very cold winter in the southeast of Austria, you don't need to put that. You need to put like the text was written in Austria in 1920. Okay, the analogies. So when we were comparing this to that, okay, is that a comparative, or that was making an example, or there's some metaphorical writing, and it just keep it simple. So get rid of all the poetry, may say, around a text, and just go straight into the facts. So one of the things that you could do now that you're going to have enough time, because you might have a very long flight to London, is to print some papers, anything that is interesting to you, and try to shrink the passages into 1/3 of the original. This is something, a very good exercise if you have like a 12-hour flight. And just provide a reference for the materials you're summarizing, because this is something that you will need to do over and over and over again for your academic career and for your academic studies. So make sure that you look at the handbook that you will get on, you might have already, and try to practice while you're preparing to come to London. But we're going to move a little bit further now, and we're going to try to explain in a very short time how to construct your bibliographies. A bibliography is the list of the materials that you use in your papers. It means that you might have read 50 papers, but you really only use 20. Your bibliography only contains those 20. It doesn't matter how many papers you read, you only put down in your bibliographies or in your reference list the papers that are cited, quoted, paraphrased, or summarized in text, in the text. Okay? So sometimes I get papers from students that have like tons of references, but then I start looking for the references in the text and they are not there. That's actually academic malpractice, because they're claiming that they read more things, but they were not able to put them in text. So when you're assessing, when you're evaluating your information, you might read more than you really use. I'm sorry for those papers that won't be quoted or cited in your research, but they do not belong whatsoever in your bibliography. So first, let's start from the very simple things. You have to write a report about a teenage use of internet in your countries, for example. But you might find most of this information online, because the press is always talking about it. So, and there are websites, and there are the government websites, and there are some things on the web that you might like to refer to. So APA provides a very clear structure. So you have the author, the year, the month, the date of the publication, the title of the article, and where it was retrieved from, so the URL. If you see the example before, says when the article or the website was, or the article in the website was published, and then you have the reference. When you're citing a book in print, so you went down to the library, you sat down and you read your book, but it's already in print, you need to cite it following the example in front of you is author, the initial of the surname of the author, initial of the author's name, the year of publication, the title of the book, the city where the book was published, state in the case of certain countries. If it's London, it's just London, but if it's New York, you need to put the state, for example, and the publisher name, Sir Simon & Schuster in this case. Okay? Citing an ebook from an e-reader, you need to put the URL, not the publisher, the URL. So where you got this book from. You got it from Amazon. Okay, it's fine. Just link it to Amazon, but link to the exact address where you got this book from. You got it from Gutenberg project because you're trying to learn Spanish. Okay, you just go to Gutenberg project and use the full link to tell the reader where you got the book from. If they want to access the book, they just need to click and access it. Same for magazine. Exactly the same format, but you need to put in the case of the magazine, the name of the magazine, the volume, because magazines are published by volumes, the issue, and the pages in which this or article is published. If you found the paper online, you need to add to the title, well, the author, the year, the month of the publication, the article title, the magazine title, the volume, the issue, the URL where you retrieved your article from. Again, newspapers. Author, article title, newspaper title, in this case, same as magazine, okay? And the pages. The case of the newspaper is quite interesting because sometimes the papers have bodies, and inside each body they have pages. So it's, let's say, body 5, so section 5, or section D and page 5. So you need to put page dot section and the page number, okay? You have a handbook with all this information, so please read it through. Use your spare time to get familiarized with the different structures of citation of different sort of sources. If you find the newspaper online, you need to tell where you retrieve it from, so the New York Times, and then the full link to that specific article. If you're citing a journal article, so we're talking about an academic journal article, okay? It's the name of the author, the year, the title of the publication, the title, the full title of the journal. Some journals have acronyms, but you don't use the acronym in here. You use the full name of the journal because there are plenty of journals that have exactly the same acronym. And if you're having someone called Smith with a journal called LBCT, you might find there are Smiths that publish in the same time on a journal. They have exactly the same acronym, and it's impossible to trace back. So make sure that you have the full name of the journal, but also the volume, the issue, and the pages. If it's found online, you will find that some journals, some academic journals, will provide you with this bit called DOI. A DOI is a digital object identifier, which is a unique link given to a paper. So this is the identity of the paper, the identification code. This is the name of the journal, so BGET, British Journal of Educational Technology. And here is information about the DOIs given to that specific journal. So in this case, you need to make sure that you link to the DOI. Something that we're going to practice in here, but keep an eye, look into it. Just navigate a Google Scholar. Go to Google Scholar and look at, search for keywords, and you will find that some journals have DOIs. But I think what I'm going to do now is a round of questions if anyone has a question, because that's the final page. I think you might be burning your brains by now, but please read the handbook up you're gonna get, and write down your questions for our first day of teaching. So because we're gonna practice it through the year.
Okay, I have a question. Can I ask it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there are some kind of books that do not have the name of the author. It's like an organization that wrote it. And I think in Spanish we might put like VVAA, instead of putting the name of the author, because it does not exist. So in English, what should we do? We have just the name of the organization.
The name of the organization. Exactly, the name of the organization. So if it's written by UNESCO, it's published by UNESCO, it's UNESCO. If it's published by the United Nations and there is no specific author, then, but in this case, you tend to use,
even in,
hold on. But in this case, you tend to look at the editor, because you need to mention who edited. There is a human being behind every academic activity. So, UNESCO has the authorship, okay? But someone or some people did the editing. So if you look on the handbook, you will find books edited by someone. There is a technique to cite this book that's been edited, but when you cite them in text, you just quote the UNESCO or the OECD or the United Nations, that's fine, or the World Bank, mostly for reports. In the case of the reports are provided by the organization. Okay, we're talking about like technical reports, so they are provided by the organization. It's the Organization of American States or the European Union. Okay, they might not have an editor. If they don't have an editor, they don't have an editor. That's fine, but they tend to have someone responsible to make sure that the publication went out. So this is something that you need to look into it.